My name is Ava Morgan. I'm 21 years old, and on the night I inherited a $55 million hotel, my mother looked me dead in the eyes and told me I wasn't mature enough to own anything, not even my own future. Her husband stood behind her, smiling like he'd already won, like my life was just paperwork waiting for his signature. I should have cried. I didn't, because while they thought they were cornering me, they had no idea the trap wasn't around me. It was around them. Before I go any further, tell me where you're watching from, and hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by family. Trust me, you're not the only one. People think money creates greed, but sometimes it just reveals what was already hiding under the surface. What happened next didn't just expose my family, it exposed everything I thought I knew. I didn't grow up in a loud house. I grew up in a house where silence had sharp edges, where every word felt like it was being judged before it ever hit the air. My earliest memories aren't of laughter or messy kitchens or a TV running too loud. They're of my mother Vanessa posing under bright ring lights while my father stood just outside the frame holding the cords so she wouldn't trip. She never thanked him. Not once. She'd just flick her hair, tilt her chin, and say, "Hold it higher, Daniel." The lighting makes or breaks the shot. I was 8 the first time I realized my father's love was treated like a stage prop. We were sitting at the dinner table, the three of us. The overhead chandelier flickered the way it always did because Mom refused to replace the bulbs unless a photographer was coming over. She handed me a plate of peas without looking, but when Ethan, just a friend back then, called her phone, she pushed her chair back and answered with a giggle I'd never heard directed at my dad. The peas rolled off my plate onto the placemat, and Dad quietly picked them up with his fingers. He didn't say anything. He never did. He just swallowed the humiliation like it was dinner. I didn't know it then, but that silence would matter later. Flashbacks come in layers for me like peeling wallpaper. Little things you think don't matter until years later when they collapse all at once. There was the school recital where I won a district art award for a blueprint I designed. I'd stayed up all night cutting tiny foam pieces and tracing every line with a razor. Dad showed up in a wrinkled shirt holding a bouquet he bought from a gas station. Mom arrived 20 minutes late in a dress meant for a red carpet. She took selfies in the lobby and asked the principal if the lighting could be adjusted before she stepped on stage to hand me the certificate. When the camera flashed, she leaned into me and whispered through her teeth, "Shoulders back, Ava. Don't make me look sloppy." I smiled at her, but inside something caved. The night my father left, winter had dropped its first real snow. I remember because the driveway was a sheet of white, and the flakes stuck to his eyelashes like someone had drawn them on with chalk. He was standing by the door with a suitcase that looked too small to hold a whole life. My mother stood in her silk robe, arms crossed, her voice icy as she muttered, "You're overreacting. You always overreact." My dad's jaw worked like he was chewing the words before letting them out. Then he said it, the sentence that would echo in me for years. "My love isn't a prop, Vanessa." She rolled her eyes. "Don't be dramatic." He looked at me, really looked at me, and his shoulders dropped. "I can't stay in a house where feelings are accessories," he whispered. "I'm sorry, Ava." He hugged me so tightly I felt his ribs. I didn't know what leaving meant, not really. But when the door shut behind him, the silence that followed was the kind that doesn't leave. A silence that grows legs and crawls into the walls. It became the soundtrack of my teenage years. 2 months later, Ethan was living with us full-time. His toothbrush on the sink, his cologne in the hall, his voice in the kitchen on speakerphone talking about leverage and asset positioning. He was shiny, successful, polished, everything Vanessa adored. He pretended to like me too. He'd say things like, "You're such a smart girl, Ava. You'll go far if you let the right people guide you." I didn't know what he meant then, but I learned. Oh, I learned. I was 17 the night everything shifted. Mom and Ethan were arguing loud enough that even the walls couldn't bury it. I crept down the hallway in socks, stopping just before the kitchen. I heard Ethan hiss, "The girl doesn't matter, as long as we secure the ownership. Secure the ownership. Secure." The words didn't make sense yet, but the intention did. Something inside me tightened like a fist closing slowly. Later that week, Mom told me I'd be moving in with Grandma Eleanor for stability. She said it like she was doing me a favor, like she wasn't just removing the only witness left in that house who wasn't blinded by her spotlight. But moving to Grandma's wasn't a punishment. It was the first breath I'd had in years. Her home smelled of cedar and old books, and her office was a sanctuary typewriter, click stacks of blueprints, framed photos of the first hotel she built with her bare hands at 22. She didn't treat me like a child. She treated me like someone who could eventually take over the world if I learned how to read its patterns. She'd slide a financial report toward me and say, "Tell me what's wrong with this picture," the same way someone else might hand a grandchild a puzzle. Or she'd walk me through a hotel lobby and say, "The walls remember the people who built them, so build something worth remembering." I didn't know it then, but she was teaching me for a war I didn't yet know I'd have to fight. And that war would start the week I turned 21. My 21st birthday should have felt like a beginning, but something about that week carried the heaviness of an ending. The air in Grandma's house felt different, like the walls were bracing for impact. I didn't understand why not yet. All I knew was that Eleanor insisted on making me breakfast herself, something she rarely did. The kitchen smelled like burnt toast and expensive coffee beans, and she set a leather folder in front of me as casually as if she were placing down a salt shaker. "This is yours," she said. The folder was heavier than it looked. I felt the weight through my palms. When I opened it, the first page hit me like a physical blow. Ownership documents. The flagship Morgan Hotel. $55 million. My name printed in black ink like it had always belonged there. "I don't understand," I whispered. "You will," she said softly. "And sooner than you think." At the time, I thought she meant the responsibility, the pressure, the future. I didn't realize she meant the danger. That afternoon I walked through the hotel alone, trying to ground myself. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, staff members greeting me with warm smiles as if they already knew. The chandeliers reflected in the polished floor like 1,000 tiny suns. I touched the brass railing of the grand staircase, imagining how many hands had run across it for decades. Eleanor had built this empire from a single roadside motel. And she was handing the crown to me, her quiet granddaughter, with more sketches than confidence. I wandered into the archive room in the West Wing, the one filled with old contracts, dusty binders, the scent of paper that had seen too much history. I wasn't looking for anything. Maybe that's why the universe decided it was the perfect moment to punch me in the stomach. There it was. A loan agreement. 2 years old. My name is signed at the bottom in a perfect curve. Except I didn't sign it. My heart thudded. Not skipped. Thudded. Hard. I traced the signature, my signature, but not. The loop of the A was wrong. The tail on the G in Morgan curved inward while mine always curved out. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. Someone had used my name, my credit, my identity. 2 years ago. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew who had the audacity. Vanessa. And Ethan. I pressed the document to my chest and sank onto a metal stool, trying to quiet the ringing in my ears. My hands were shaking so badly the paper rustled like wings. I didn't know it then, but that piece of paper was the first thread in a much bigger net they were weaving around me. That evening I walked into the rooftop bar to clear my head. Miles was behind the counter polishing glasses, the sunset flaring orange behind him. He took one look at me and set the glass down. "What happened?" he asked. I slid the loan paper toward him. His eyebrows shot up. "Ava, this is a problem." "No kidding." He hesitated, then leaned in. "There's something else. Ethan's been here. A lot. Meeting this guy in suits that don't fit right. Shady vibe. They talk in whispers and leave separately." My stomach dropped. When past few months, my fingers tightened around the edge of the bar. The loan, the whispered meetings, Ethan's obsession with ownership. It was all connected. I left the hotel early, walking home in the cold. The streetlights glowed pale gold on the wet pavement. My breath came out in the clouds. Everything felt too still, too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes your skin crawl. When I reached Grandma's driveway, her office light was still on. I stepped inside and placed the loan document on her desk without a word. She adjusted her glasses, scanned it, then looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. Something between sadness and fury. I was hoping she said quietly that they would wait a little longer. For what? For the mask to slip, she answered, "So you could see them clearly." We spent the next hour going through her old files, pulling out anything with Vanessa's or Ethan's name on it. Financial irregularities, misfiled payments, ghost accounts. Every page was a new bruise. Eleanor didn't cry. She didn't shake. She just kept turning the pages with a calmness that scared me more than anything. Finally, she closed the last folder and said, "Tomorrow night we will invite them to dinner." I blinked. "Dinner? That's your plan?" "No," she said, standing. "That's the stage." And suddenly everything made sense. The heaviness in the air, the folder she gave me, the way she'd been watching the windows like she expected shadows. War wasn't coming. War was already here. And my 21st birthday had been the opening shot. The next morning didn't feel like a morning at all. It felt like waking up in the middle of a storm you somehow slept through. The house was too quiet, too still. The kind of quiet that isn't peace at all, but pressure. I walked downstairs expecting to find Grandma in her office, but instead I heard voices. 2 voices I didn't want to hear. Vanessa's laugh was the first strike. Sharp, artificial, too bright for a winter morning. "Oh, please, Ethan," she said. "It's not stealing if it's staying in the family." I froze at the bottom step. They were here. Early, uninvited, already making themselves comfortable in Grandma's living room. Ethan stood near the window, phone in hand, tapping through emails. He didn't even look up when I walked in. Vanessa sat at the dining table, flipping through Eleanor's old property ledgers like they were catalogs for a shopping spree. "What are you doing here?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. Vanessa lifted her coffee cup coffee she hadn't been offered and smiled like we were filming some lifestyle segment. "Sweetheart, it's your big week. You didn't think we'd stay away, did you?" I actually did. She laughed, the kind of laugh people use when they're pretending something hurt doesn't hurt. "You're so dramatic. We just came to help." Help with what? Ethan finally looked up, adjusting his cufflinks. "Transitions are tricky, Ava. Managing a hotel isn't just paperwork. It requires experience, guidance." I felt my jaw clench. "And let me guess, you two are the guidance." Vanessa leaned back, crossing her legs. "Well, someone has to step up. You're a full-time student, you barely have time to manage your own laundry. Running a multi-million-dollar business is a lot. And you think you're the answer?" She smiled wider. "Family helps family. Family." That word from her mouth felt like poison drifting through the air. I walked past them, grabbed a glass, and poured myself water just to give my hands something to do other than shake. The silence stretched too long, so long it started to itch. And then I asked, "Does Grandma know you're here?" Vanessa blinked, her smile cracking. "She's resting." "Uh-huh," I said. "Right." Ethan's eyes narrowed a fraction like he caught the sarcasm. "Ava, don't make this difficult. We're trying to prevent a financial disaster." I raised an eyebrow. A disaster for who? Neither of them answered, which told me everything. I walked away, heart thudding against my ribs. I didn't need to argue. Not yet. Not when Grandma and I were quietly assembling our war map upstairs. But every step down the hallway felt like walking past open flames. Later that afternoon, I headed to the hotel to breathe, but instead, I found another fire waiting. As soon as I walked in, Miles waved me over behind the bar. His face looked tight, like he'd been holding something in all morning. "You need to see this," he muttered, sliding his phone across the counter. It was a live stream, Vanessa's live stream. She stood in front of her ring light in some luxury sweet eyes glimmering with faux sadness. Family is complicated, she was telling her followers, hundreds of thousands of them, especially when assets are involved. I'm doing everything I can to keep things peaceful for Ava. She's young. She doesn't understand the business pressure yet. Miles paused the video. "You're trending," he said. My stomach twisted. "Trending for what? People think you're throwing tantrums because you got an inheritance. They think Vanessa's the reasonable one." I swallowed a bitter laugh. "Of course they do. That's not the worst part," he said. "Comments are speculating the hotel isn't stable. Investors follow Vanessa. This could hit you hard." My pulse kicked up. Vanessa wasn't just manipulating me, she was prepping a narrative. A public one, turning the world against me before I even had a chance to speak. I walked away from the bar and headed toward the hallway where the archive room sat. Something was pulling me there. Maybe instinct. Maybe dread. When I reached the file drawers, I noticed one was slightly open, the exact drawer where I found the forged loan document the day before. Inside, papers had been rearranged, moved, touched. Someone had been here. A flicker of panic shot up my spine. Who else knew about the forged signature? Who knew where to look? How much had they seen? As I sifted through the folders, a shadow passed behind me. I turned sharply. Aubrey Reed stood in the doorway, pulling a hood off her blonde hair. Ethan's daughter. A girl I barely knew. "Oh," she said. "Didn't mean to scare you." "What are you doing here?" My voice came out colder than I intended. She shrugged. "Dad said you were handling things poorly. Wanted me to check if you were freaking out." I stared at her, freaking out about what exactly. Aubrey leaned against the doorframe, twirling her car keys. "He said once the deal closes, we're set for life. I guess this is all just part of the transition." My throat tightened. "What deal?" She blinked. "You don't know?" "No," I said. "I don't." Aubrey shifted suddenly, uncomfortable. "Maybe I shouldn't have." "You already did." She bit her lip, then stepped back. "Just be careful, Ava." That sentence, "be careful," didn't sound like advice. It sounded like a warning. She left as quickly as she came, and the moment she disappeared, the cold realization hit me. Ethan wasn't just planning a takeover. He had partners, investors. He was building a future that didn't include me or Grandma. I checked my phone. 5 missed calls from Grandma. My pulse spiked. When I stepped outside the hotel minutes later, night had already swallowed the sky. The parking lot lights flickered like dying candles. And that's when I heard it, the low, urgent whisper of a man around the corner. I followed the sound quietly. My breath held tight. Ethan stood near the dumpsters, talking to a uniformed staff member I didn't recognize. His back was to me, but I could see the movement of his hands. He was giving the man something. A thick envelope. "Keep your mouth shut," Ethan said. "You never saw the documents. You never saw me. You understand?" The staff member nodded, stuffing the envelope under his jacket. A sick dread pooled in my stomach. Ethan turned, and for a split second I thought he'd see me. But a car pulled into the lot, distracting him just long enough for me to step behind a pillar. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone. If I couldn't stop him yet, I could at least record him. I recorded 30 seconds. 30 seconds of Ethan handing off an envelope, lowering his voice, threatening a staff member into silence. 30 seconds that shook something loose inside me, not fear, not panic, but clarity. Because in that dim parking lot under flickering lights and winter air so sharp it cut my lungs, I finally understood this wasn't desperation. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a plan, a long game, and I was the final obstacle standing between Ethan and whatever empire he thought he was building. I slipped inside the hotel through the side entrance and headed straight for the elevator, my fingers trembling so badly I almost dropped my phone. I replayed the video just once to confirm I hadn't imagined it. His voice was unmistakable. His threat was undeniable. And the man's fear, real, raw. When the elevator doors opened on the lobby floor, Miles was standing there waiting for me. His eyes widened when he saw my face. "Ava, what happened?" I couldn't answer. Not yet. I walked past him right to an empty corner booth and sank into the leather seat. He followed, sliding in across from me. "Talk to me," he said. I pushed my phone toward him and hit play. He watched the video silently, jaw tightening with every passing second. When it ended, he leaned back, exhaling like he'd been punched. "Okay," he said. "That's bad." "Yeah," I whispered. "I know. No, I mean, this is criminal. Actual criminal. Your mother knows, she's part of it," I said. "Maybe not the details, but she knows enough." He rubbed a hand down his face. "Ava, you need help. Real help. Lawyers, police, someone." "I can't go to anyone," I said. "Not yet. If I move too fast, they'll bury the evidence before anyone can blink. That's risky. So I'm doing nothing." He looked at me, really looked at me, and something in his expression shifted. "You're not the same girl I grew up with." I didn't answer. Because he was right. I wasn't. I left the hotel shaken but steady enough to start connecting the dots. If Ethan had gone this far, what else was he hiding? What else had they done behind my back while pretending to be my support system? By the time I reached Grandma's house, night had swallowed the forest outside. Eleanor was pacing in her office, her typewriter silent for once. She turned the second I stepped inside. "Where were you?" she asked, voice sharper than usual. "I found something," I said. What I showed her the video. She didn't gasp. She didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. She just nodded once, as if confirming something she had suspected all along. "This changes the timeline," she said. "What timeline?" She sat down behind her desk, folding her hands. "I hadn't planned to move this fast. I wanted you to have time. Time to think. Time to breathe. But we don't have that now." I sat across from her. "Move how?" Her eyes softened. "Ava, I'm not just protecting the business. I'm protecting you." Her words landed heavier than any legal document. Before I could respond, footsteps echoed down the hall. Vanessa appeared in the doorway without knocking, without hesitation, like she owned the oxygen in the room. "There you are," she said, smiling tightly. "We need to talk." "No," Eleanor said. "We don't." Vanessa ignored her. "Ethan and I have been discussing the transition. You're making things unnecessarily difficult, Ava. Investors are getting nervous. Because of you, I said. Vanessa scoffed. Don't be childish. You're in over your head and you know it. There are legal issues, complicated ones you're not equipped to handle. Legal issues like forging my signature? I asked, quietly. Her smile faltered for a split second, but she recovered fast. If you have something to say it clearly. I saw the documents, I said. The loan, the shell accounts, the money that vanished under your name and Ethan's. And guess what? The police will see them too. Something dark flickered in her eyes. You think you can threaten me? I don't have to, I said. You already threatened yourself. She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a hiss. If you don't hand over management, Ethan and I will expose your little legal complications. Do you want the world to think you're unstable? Reckless, a fraud before you even graduate? I felt my pulse spike, but before I could answer, Eleanor stood up. Enough, Vanessa. My mother turned. Don't speak to me like I said enough. The room chilled. Even Vanessa felt it. You have 24 hours. Eleanor said, each word precise. After tomorrow, you won't step foot in this house again unless invited. Vanessa's mouth fell open. You wouldn't dare. Try me. Vanessa left in a hurricane of perfume and resentment. The moment she was gone, Eleanor sank back into her chair. She's scared, she said softly. That makes her dangerous. I swallowed hard. What do we do now tomorrow? Eleanor said we will invite them to dinner. We let them speak. We let them dig their own grave. And then we close it. I nodded slowly, but that wasn't the end of the escalation, far from it. That night, unable to sleep, I walked to the kitchen for water. When I flipped on the light, I nearly dropped the glass in my hand. Ethan was standing at the window. In my house, in the dark. Couldn't sleep, he asked, turning slowly, hands in his pockets like he belonged there. My breath caught. What are you doing here? Check on you, he said. You've been unpredictable. Get out. He smirked. Ava, come on. Don't start acting like your grandmother. She thinks she's invincible. She's not. Neither are you. Something cold slid down my spine. He took one slow step forward. You can either work with us or be crushed by us. And trust me, sweetheart, being crushed is much more painful than signing a few papers. My hands shook, but I didn't back up. Get out, I repeated. His smirk widened. Tomorrow is going to be interesting. Then he slipped out the back door like a shadow fading. I stood alone in the silence, heart pounding, realizing something terrifying. Tomorrow wasn't just dinner. It was a battlefield. And only one side was leaving with power. By the time evening came, the house didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like a set, every light, every plate, every breath placed with intention. Eleanor moved slowly, deliberately arranging the table as if preparing for royalty. But her eyes were steel. Mine must have looked the same. At exactly 7, headlights swept across the long driveway, cutting through the winter dark like knives. Car doors slammed, heels clicked, voices rose. I stood beside Grandma at the dining table when the front door opened without a knock. Vanessa strode in first, dressed in a red silk dress that looked more suited for an awards show than a family dinner. Her perfume hit the air before she did, sweet, thick, suffocating. Ethan followed, a polished smile plastered across his face like he'd spent hours practicing it in the mirror. Well, Vanessa said, dropping her coat onto a chair without asking, this looks formal. It is, Eleanor replied, voice steady. The tension was immediate, electric, suffocating. Even the candles seemed to flicker nervously. We sat. Plates clinked. Silverware tapped. Nobody touched the food. Vanessa was the first to break the silence. "Ava, darling, let's talk about the transition." Ethan and I outlined a simple, clean plan. You keep your name on the paperwork, of course, optics matter. But we'll handle the day-to-day decisions. It's really for your own good. "For my own good," I repeated. "Exactly," she said, sipping her wine like she was toasting her own delusion. "You're overwhelmed. It's obvious." Ethan nodded. "Running a hotel isn't a student project, Ava. These things require professionals." I glanced at Eleanor. She nodded once, barely perceptible. "All right," I said softly. "Then explain this." I placed the first folder, silver-polished, deliberate, on the table and slid it toward them. Vanessa's smile faltered. "What is this?" she asked. "Transparency," Eleanor said. "Exactly what you two have been begging for." Ethan reached for the folder, but I placed my hand on top of it and held his gaze. "Let me summarize for you," I said. "Bank statements. From the hotel's Burlington account. Withdrawals made under your name, Vanessa. Funds that never returned." The blood drained from her face. "That's not those numbers are old." I opened the folder. The papers fanned out like a deck of accusations. "These were pulled last week." Silence. Heavy, pounding silence. Eleanor placed the second folder onto the table. "And these," she added, "are emails sent from Ethan's consulting firm. Proposals for overseas projects that don't exist. Fake budgets. Fake clients. Real money." Ethan's jaw flexed. "You had no right." "I had every right," Eleanor cut in. "Your ambition was leaking through every crack you tried to plaster over." Vanessa tried to laugh, but it came out brittle. "You're twisting things. These documents," I cut her off. "What about this one I pulled out, the forged loan agreement? My forged signature." She froze. "That's not what it looks like," she whispered. "Really?" I tilted my head. "Because it looks exactly like fraud. Fraud committed using my name, my future." Her eyes darted to Ethan. Panic flickered. Ethan leaned forward, dropping the facade. "Listen, this doesn't have to become a problem. We can settle this quietly. You sign over management, we clean up the paperwork, and what I asked. You two walk away with a hotel worth more than $50 million. That hotel should have been mine," Vanessa snapped suddenly, venom rising to the surface. "I built that family name with Eleanor. I stood in front of every camera, every investor, every fundraiser." "You stood in front of cameras," Eleanor said sharply. "You never built anything except your reflection." Vanessa slammed her wine glass on the table. "This is ridiculous. You're ruining your own daughter." "No," Eleanor said calmly. "You did that years ago." Ethan stood now, his voice low and dangerous. "Enough. We're done playing. Ava, you're going to sign the management rights tonight, otherwise the loan issue goes public. You think your precious reputation will survive?" That I leaned back, letting the cold settle into my voice. "You mean the loan with the forged signature? The one linked to your shell companies? Please. Go public." His face tightened. That was the moment I slid my phone onto the table and hit play. The video filled the room, the sound of Ethan's whisper, the rustle of the envelope, the threat. "You keep your mouth shut. You never saw the documents." The color drained from his face. "You recorded me?" he asked, voice cracking. "Insurance," I said. Vanessa's hands shook. "Ethan, what did you do?" But Ethan didn't answer. He just stared at the video like it was a countdown. And then came the twist. Even I didn't expect. Vanessa stood sharply and pointed at him. "He did more than that. He has a secret account in the Cayman Islands. He's been cheating on me for years. He planned to leave after the deal closed." Ethan whipped toward her. "You liar! Oh, please," she snapped. "Tell them about Harper. Or the beach house you bought without telling me." The room erupted, but Eleanor raised a single hand. Silence fell instantly. "This dinner," she said, "was never about your excuses." She reached into her purse and placed a final envelope on the table. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't shake. "Vanessa. Ethan, you are hereby removed from every board, trust, and account associated with the Morgan estate. Effective immediately. Control is transferred solely to Ava. This has already been filed." Vanessa staggered backward. "You can't do this." "I already have." And then came the soft knock at the door. Detective Rowan Hale stepped inside, badge glinting. "Vanessa Reed. Ethan Reed. We have warrants related to fraud, embezzlement, and identity falsification." The room went still. Vanessa gasped. Ethan cursed. Officers stepped forward. Moments later, Ethan was in cuffs. Vanessa was crying ugly, broken sobs as they led her out. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just sat there while their world collapsed. Eleanor touched my hand. "You didn't raise your voice," she whispered. "You raised the truth." I looked at the empty chairs, the scattered evidence, the ruined wine, and I felt something shift inside me. Not relief, not triumph. Something colder, sharper. The beginning of a new kind of power. The house felt unreal the next morning. Too still, too clean. As if the night before had been a movie someone forgot to turn off. Sunlight slipped across the dining table, lighting up the silver folders, the empty wine glasses, the chair Vanessa knocked over on her way out. The echoes of their shouting were gone, but the air still tasted like consequence. Eleanor was already in the kitchen, stirring her coffee with a slow, steady rhythm. Not triumphant, not shaken, just lighter, as if she had finally set down a weight she'd been carrying for decades. "You didn't sleep," she said without looking at me. "Neither did you." She smiled faintly. "Storms don't end quietly, Ava. They end when you decide to walk through whatever's left." I sat across from her. The house hummed with a strange sense of relief, but beneath it something else lurked. Not dread exactly, just awareness. The kind you get after surviving something big enough to leave a mark. Later that afternoon, Dad showed up. No calls, no warning. He just stood on the porch, hands shoved in his coat pockets, eyes soft in a way I hadn't seen since I was a kid. I heard he said simply. I nodded. He stepped forward and hugged me, not tight, not desperate, just long enough for me to feel the apology he didn't know how to put into words. "You handled it better than any of us ever did," he murmured. But even with that comfort, the day dissolved into a blur. Meetings with Harper Lane, calls with the hotel's senior staff, statements to Detective Hale, the kind of chaos that comes after the truth finally detonates. By evening, the sky outside had turned lavender and cold. I stood on the rooftop of the hotel, looking down at the city lights glittering like broken promises. The wind stung my eyes, but it felt grounding. Miles joined me, handing me a ginger ale. "You okay?" "I don't know," I said, honestly. He nodded. "You don't have to be. Not yet." I took a sip, exhaled, and checked my phone. One new email. No sender, no subject. Just one sentence. "Your family isn't done with you yet." My grip tightened around the phone. I looked out at the skyline the empire Eleanor built, the one I now had to protect, not just from strangers, but from blood. They thought last night ended something. They were wrong. It only opened the next chapter. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, hit subscribe. Because stories like mine don't end with a single victory or a single arrest. They ripple. They return. And sometimes the people who should have protected you are the ones who try the hardest to take everything away. But you're not alone. Not in the fight, not in the fallout, not in the rebuilding. Drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from and stay with me. This chapter may be over, but the next one is already unfolding. This story isn't over. This story